the whole purpose really was starting this organization is I was really frustrated not seeing groups working on prevention when we always see signs of domestic violence before something actually happens. We should be teaching our youth at a younger age and about what a healthy relationship looks like. We often are only seeing the bad, right? We see the statistics say that, they said more than 50% of marriages end in divorce. So we see all these different things about conflict, but we never are really taught about how to resolve conflict.
Welcome to Her Drive Podcast, a female-focused interview series with women of the world discussing their road trips to success. I'm your host, Cindy Kremblatt, a travel expert, business owner, and curious spirit with a knack for meeting fascinating women. Please join me as I hop in the passenger seat and chat with these ambitious women about what drives them, twists and turns, and those pedal to the metal moments. Let's drive. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Her Drive Podcast. I'm very pumped for today's guest, Miss Becky Lee. Becky and I met in Nicaragua at the beginning of January. We were both there for a friend's birthday celebration. And I had heard of Becky before through the friend who, mutual friend, about what a badass she is. And I had to meet her. And then upon seeing Becky, I'm like, yeah, she's super cool, but I didn't know her personal story and what she's doing with her life. And our last night together, there was some time where I got to kind of dive in a bit to Becky's story, and it's just absolutely amazing. And what she's doing with the organization that she founded is beyond warming and is truly making an impact. So I wanted to have Becky on the show to kind of dive into all of these amazing stories and the dynamic woman that she is. So Becky Lee, welcome to Her Drive.
No, thank you so much. I'm really excited to even be asked to be part of this project that you've created. And it's really amazing and also really empowering to be able to connect with other like-minded women who not only want to share their story and their experiences, but also be able to sort of touch other people's, heart. But also, I think a lot of times when we're going through our own struggles, we think we're going through it alone. And so I'm really inspired by your own sort of progression and journey to where you are today, as well as your interest and desire and passion to really connect with other women. So thank you for this opportunity.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's such a pleasure to have you. And thank you for those really sweet, kind words. So yeah, I mean, it's a sisterhood, and I didn't realize, just a few years ago, how important it is to have a sisterhood and a support system to say, you know what, I'm going through a little bit of a something, to lean on, and then also to have people to celebrate with you and to understand, how important not only just sharing in the bad times, but sharing in the freaking bomb ass great times are as well.
Yes, I totally agree. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So Becky, if there was going to be like a big billboard on the highway of life that would describe, you, and what would it say, and what would it look like?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Usually it's like what are the three adjectives that describe you, that kind of more in a box. For me, I think when people see me, when I see myself, they see passion. They see somebody who is always sort of on the go, living their life to their fullest. One of the things that it's really interesting. Yesterday, I was walking to my office, and I was in a sort of stressful situation and trying to get all these things done. And the woman at the front desk, she said, "Don't be so serious. You only have one life to live." And typically, that is my motto in terms of there's no really time for regrets. Yes, we make mistakes. Yes, we have hurdles, and yes, there's little things that can irk us and put us sort of in a more less, this is now, let's work on this. But that's something I think that I've always tried to sort of live to the fullest. I'm a truly a glass half full, not a glass half empty person. And I think that also energy and I think perspective is also, shown through my friendships with people around me, my family, where we think about life as, this is life, live it, carpe diem, and really, really move forward instead of looking at the past.
Amazing. So when you're looking, I kind of want to actually look through the rearview mirror.
Sure.
On your life. And, if you could kind of, when someone asks you, tell me about yourself, like, how do you how do you define yourself and what you do?
I think a lot of the things that I do and like a lot of the things that drive me, I think are encompassed in the word love and the word and really, I think, all of us have sort of a different idea of what happiness is and what defines happiness for us. And I think as we go through different parts of our lives, whether it's career, whether it's, age, whether it's just different sort of introspective things that we're thinking about in terms of like, oh, what would be on your gravestone, or what would you want, said at your eulogy, at your funeral? For me, I think it's love, being loved and also loving fully. And I think that, I think obviously when I was in undergrad, or, when I was trying to figure out career-wise what I wanted to do, but also at the same time too, time passes by and the relationships that you have and the things happen, you're just like, oh, I should have, could have. I've been really trying to really engage in the people that are around me and the relationships that I have to really make sure that they know how I feel about them, but also really, in terms of being, having integrity in what you say and what you do, but also understanding and valuing those relationships. I think specifically where I am today, that this has much more meaning now, is due to the fact that my life has been so much around my work. And my work being that, I started this organization in 2006 as a domestic violence lawyer, wanting to support others going through domestic violence, but also prevent domestic violence from happening. So working with the younger generation. And I know as much as that my passion's really been all encompassing in running Becky's Fund, and really doing as much as I can to help the people that are affected by domestic violence. I also know that in doing so, I've also hurt relationships with my own friends and family, where I haven't put, real relationships as a priority, where, getting a call or getting a text at 2 a.m. or, early in the morning and my partner saying like, you need to turn off your phone. And then I get guilty saying, well, I don't know if it might be a situation where that person needs help and only I can help that person. And so it's been interesting because now obviously past the 10-year mark of running this organization, then you also understand and try to sort of see like where am I in my personal life, where am I supposed to be in terms of like the typical journey. And then at the same time too, am I fulfilling all the things I want personally for myself on that end? And so that's something definitely that I've shifted, I think, in the last year, even, in the trip that we met on, in Nicaragua, understanding, the connections that you have with people and really, really taking sort of a step back and saying, who do I spend time with? What are those relationships? What do they mean to me? Am I giving as much to them as they're giving to me? And really putting a value on that. Because I think a lot of times too, you get caught up in the emotions, you get caught up in these sort of, goals per se. And often those goals aren't really true to who you are. And, and having a really honest conversation, looking in the mirror and saying, are you really happy with what you're doing, with how you're living your life? And then also at the other side, being able to have friends and family who are honest enough with you and who can basically call you out and say like, you know what, this is not, I know you think this is the right path and this is the right thing for you to be doing right now, but it's actually taking away from the bigger picture of what your goals are.
Wow, that is really powerful, especially coming from a person who, has created an organization that is addressing an issue that is more pervasive than I think many people even acknowledge.
Sure.
And to hear that you are doing something so powerful in your work, but then that leads to neglect in your personal life, kind of hits home for me in a lot of different ways. So when you said it's been about a year since you've like kind of made this change. So was there a specific moment where you were like, oh my God, I really need to focus on my interpersonal relationships rather than like my professional relationships and my work?
Sure. I mean, there's a couple of things that I am like really open to talking about because I think that women, a lot of times we wear so many different hats, and we typically, our hat for ourselves is usually the last hat that we sort of, put on and really, dig into in terms of like what we need to do for ourselves. One of the things that I had an event last year, my main fundraising event called Walk This Way. And one of my close girlfriends, she's probably, she's my youngest girlfriend, but she's one of the most honest. I met her at a time of both our lives where we both were going through stuff, and she has been always very amazing and very honest with me. And she had just moved to New York, going through her own stuff, and started a new job. And she actually came down the month and the weeks before the big event because some of the main leadership components of the event were lacking and had fallen to the wayside due to some just schedules, and people had stuff coming up. And so after the event, maybe a couple months later, then she was like taking me aside, giving me some wake up calls about, the people that have committed themselves to the organization, yes, because they believe in the cause, but more so because of their relationship and their friendship and their love for me, as a person, but also as a friend. And understanding, often we take people for granted, not even realizing it until something happens, and then you look back, but in the rush of getting things done, often you don't have time to you sort of reflect, because then you move on to the next thing. And also for myself, I'm 41 years old. And one of the things that, when you always think about like, I should have been doing this at this part of my life. One of the things that I not regret, but then you wonder, like, was I supposed to, or should I slow down in this juncture or in this relationship or in this time period? And like talking to other women, especially in this age group, where 35 and over, who want to have children, but maybe don't know if it's the right time or with the right person, but also having the idea of talking about your own health and your own sort of personal sort of priorities. And so I actually froze my eggs a couple years back. But then in terms of just thinking about that, in this next sort of being in your 40s, and what does that look like as a woman? Yes, with your career, but also the quote, how do you balance both, your personal and your professional? And I think we often don't talk about it because I don't know if it's embarrassing, or more so like, why is it something that's so taboo to address? Is it a weakness because men and women talk differently about balancing personal and professional because of our biological clock and those issues around that? But that, a lot of those sort of questions that I was putting out into the open and sharing openly with girlfriends who, were asking, well, why did you do it? How much money does it cost? And, do you have any recommendations about talking about it, or, that kind of thing. And even friends who were then married, who have kids, and then, felt like after they had gotten married and had children, our friendship sort of went to the wayside a little bit more because they felt like we didn't have as many common interests, or they said that they felt bad that, their issues, problems they were talking about seemed so trivial to, my whole issues about helping people, like, save their lives. And I was like, it's not about that. At the end of the day, it's about following your passions and following your own personal goals. And we all have them. And I think that women often, when we're going through different changes in our lives, different than men, because I think men can put things to the side. They can compartmentalize much better in terms of, like, when they get in a fight, they can talk it over. The grudge is gone right away. But that's one thing that I've been saddened from, hearing other women and other female friends' experiences, and then feeling that we can't really share when different things come up that sort of they feel like, well, now we're in a different type of relationship, or now I don't feel that I'm as close to you for XYZ. So I don't know if that was an answer to your question, but just sharing some of the different things that I've seen in the last year that I think specifically as women we should be more. We should realize the power of being able to have this open discussion and sort of setting aside our insecurities, or even some of these stigmas I think that we see attached to certain issues that we talk about.
Oh, I definitely agree. I believe in, as much as possible, with tact, being radically honest. That's not only just in your relationships with others, but more importantly with yourself. And I'm either with a lot of people or I'm completely alone. And lately I've been mainly alone. And sometimes I wonder, I'm like, am I messing with myself right now? Like, am I being honest, or is it like my itty bitty shitty committee, like, messing with me? And, it's in those moments where you need to reach out to other people and who truly understand the path that you've been, walking and have been alongside you. And for the longest time, like, I had very shallow relationships, not to say that I didn't value or love the people, but I wasn't allowing them to truly know me or like bear witness to the person that I am, because I was afraid of like flaws and other things that would come up. And now I've realized, you know, I've embraced who I am. I like the bullshit that I've done to myself and put myself through. I think it builds character. And I also feel more comfortable in being vulnerable. And I feel like through being vulnerable with everyone, whether it's male or female, it allows them to like drop their walls and give a little bit and be more vulnerable. And I'm never a person who really wants to attack. I want to like love, like you said, like focusing on that word of love. So, you know, in realizing, okay, should you slow down? Should you speed up? Like, I don't think those questions are ever going to go away, especially for females. Like, we have so many different titles and hats that we have to wear. And, you know, I'm going to be turning 30 this year. So talking about the whole like fertility thing is a whole nother subject. And I've never even wanted children, never had that burning desire. But then as like time is ticking, I'm thinking, well, shoot, should I do the, you know, the freezing of the eggs thing? Should I have like gone back to, you know, my relationship? And speaking about being very honest, I was married, and you met my ex-husband in Nicaragua, who we travel together, we're friends. Like, it's a really weird relationship between he and I. And sometimes, you know, he and I both question, like, did we mess up by getting a divorce? Like, we could have been together for like 9 years now, and we're still friends. And those are the weird questions that pop up. But I have chosen to walk this path of like being an explorer and an adventurer, and I'm like, fuck it, this relationship can't work, and I'm going to focus on the things that like I need as an individual. And I still question it. And you can't go back in time and change it. All you can do is like focus on the now and the forward, and try to apply, you know, these lessons learned, in life. So that's kind of just like off on a tangent for me, but I feel as if I can relate to you on so many different levels. And I love that you're having these discussions with women and, you know, focusing on your interpersonal relationships. But, you know, looking back through your life, I would really love to kind of start at the genesis of your story of, you know, study. You focused on women's studies, I believe, in undergrad, and then kind of like, can you walk us through like the road trip of your life thus far,
Sure.
and how it's led you to creating Becky's Fund?
Sure. So I was always interested in women's issues. Initially, when I entered Michigan, I sort of on the pre-med route. My father's a doctor. My sister's a doctor. That wasn't, obviously my sister is younger than me, but I think all of us were sort of in this, I was raised very, you know, the whole idea about giving back, and that how much you gain by helping others, but also to, you know, sort of, it was more probably obviously under a Christian and sort of this religious sort of aspect of, you know, like philanthropy, but it was something that I think my parents just instilled in us growing up, from a very, very early age, where even they were going on mission trips. I remember being like 7 or 8, and my parents saying to me, if we don't like make it back, because they were going to often communist countries as well, saying like, these are the directions. You have to like call your aunt. You have to transfer these funds. I mean, being 7 and being told like, this is, you know, like, this is how you give back. You know, we're fortunate enough to have the life that we have, and, you know, to live, you know, sort of with the promotion of service. I mean, that's what I was raised with. So I understand also too, where my sister and I both sort of had this, you know, so the perspective, what we want to do with our careers in the same way as helping other people. When I got to Michigan, med school was really not in the books for me. Chemistry, and we didn't get along at all. And but I saw other routes. And you know, one of the things that I've always loved I've always loved meeting people, loved hearing their stories, loved, you know, finding connections. You always see sort of the value of people and where they're coming from, or why they are where they you know, they are, and how they respond to something due to whether it's nature versus nurture. And it was fascinating to me. And so when I got to Michigan, I actually met a professor who was, she was at the law clinic working to defend women who had killed their abusers in self-defense. And she was this amazing, amazing woman, Andrea Lyon. And basically, after she spoke to our class, I was in a class called Women in Prison, helping women after their sentencing was over, helping them acclimate back into society. So whether it was helping them find a job, housing, finding their kids again, it was this class where I met this woman, and she, I went up to her basically asking her if I could intern with her that summer. And so that summer I interned, and, the cases that we worked on helping women, whether they were being trafficked or they were in jail because they were accomplice, not unknowingly, to a drug, a case, or even with domestic violence. And so after working with her, I realized a lot of the different sort of pieces that were part of this whole problem of women being able to leave domestic violence due to the different pieces, whether it's not having a lawyer, not having enough finances, resources, being blamed. And so I ended up, after working with her, then applying to law school. Going to law school after taking a year off, I taught kickboxing and some other fitness classes. I was always into fitness as my stress release. And then went to Pitt for undergrad, for law school after going to Michigan, and then moving out to DC after finding a job that was specifically tailored to, helping not just women, but women and men be able to get out of the situation that they were in, as well as helping to improve the policy surrounding domestic violence survivors. And then randomly, I was recruited in 2006. There was a casting agent that, was looking for applicants. At the time, my season of Survivor was divided into, quote, races. And one of the problems that they were having in finding an Asian woman was that not many Asian female applicants were applying. And so she had seen my picture in my profile on MySpace, which was, back in the day, a different sort of, that was the original sort of social media site. Obviously, at that time, they were using it more for music, and finding talent. And so I applied with this casting agent asking me to submit my application. I, at the time, thought it'd be an amazing experience, as well as opportunity to be able to highlight the problem of domestic violence. Domestic violence affects 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men, and that's only what's reported. And I thought that it'd be a really cool experience to be able to highlight an issue that's not often talked about. We only usually hear about domestic violence when we're talking about a tragedy, and then we were going back to what could have been done, what were the warning flags, and so I was very lucky to be able to try out, make the show, and then 2006, basically. The experience of being on that reality show, where it was, a really fun experience. I got to meet a lot of amazing people. And then I was able to fight hard and come in 3rd place. I won some money, and I won about $85,000. And then I put that money to starting the organization Beckys Fund when we got our tax, our nonprofit status in 2007. And one of the gentlemen, the guy who won the $1 million, his name was Yul Kwan. He's also a lawyer as well. He now is working at Facebook out in California. But he also then, he joined my board and donated $25,000 initially with his earnings in the very start as well. And, the whole purpose really was starting this organization is I was really frustrated not seeing groups working on prevention when we always see signs of domestic violence before something actually happens. And also the fact that we should be teaching our youth at a younger age, both young men and young women, about what a healthy relationship looks like. We often are only seeing the bad, right? We see the statistics say that, they said more than 50% of marriages end in divorce. So we see all these different things about conflict, but we never are really taught about how to resolve conflict. And so I really wanted to focus with our mission on creating the space addressing prevention, but also second, allowing the space to have men and boys be part of the conversation. Because obviously, a big part of groups today working in the space, we're always talking about we need to save these women from abuse, and that savior mentality is actually not empowering. Really, our goals as advocates, as friends of people going through this, is that we want to help somebody help themselves. And so, for me, to say, you need to leave now, or you need to get out of the situation and do XYZ, we're being no different than the abuser taking their power away to tell them what to do. And so I really tell people, I know that you want me to talk to this person. People always say like, well, can you call my sister, or can you call this person and tell them to leave? I'm like, actually, no, it doesn't work that way. That person has to make the decision themselves, just like any addiction, problem and also second, at the end of the day, that person has to make the decision because they are the ones that have to live with it. And so our goal and our job as advocates is to help empower them, help them understand what the options are, what possible places they can go or do to be able to help them get out of the situation, but then also build them up. I mean, domestic violence really breaks someone down mentally, psychologically. And so one of the biggest parts of why someone doesn't leave is the fear. And, having been told by somebody that you're worthless, that you can't do this, that who else is going to love you again, like this person. And so I always encourage people who want to help somebody getting through the situation is help build their confidence up. They're not going to leave until they feel confident that they can leave, as well as they feel like they can safely leave too. And so that's sort of a short summary of how, I've started and how I came about to going from law school, and specializing in domestic violence, then to starting this organization because I saw that there was a specific niche and also sort of a hole in some of the services provided by domestic violence groups today.
Wow. Well, thank you for that amazing summary. I have so many questions to follow it. I guess my first question is, why do you think that you were drawn to domestic violence rather than some other, challenge?
Sure. And so I often get the question, like, did you have a situation? Are you a survivor of domestic violence? Like, why are you so passionate about this issue? And so it's always, the first question. And completely honest, like, I've never been affected. I grew up in a very loving, very, very, very kind and generous, and my upbringing where, my parents are amazing parents, and through their leadership and example, like, that's how I want my relationship to be, with my partner, but also with my friends and loved ones. I think for me, it was more so seeing the fact that, seeing who it's affected, whether it's my personal friends or even, in terms of seeing how it can happen to anybody. Randomly, I think that one of the things that we never really talk about is that a lot of the stigma attached to talking about this issue. And so the more I started talking about it after, talking to groups of people, talking at schools, I mean, at least one person at every single speech I've ever had talking about this issue, even if I'm sitting on the bus or on the metro or on a train going on a trip, on a plane, everyone's been affected by this issue. And while, yes, we talked about statistics of 1 in 3, 1 in 4, that's like the whole idea about the whole personally affected. Everyone's been touched by this issue, whether they realize it or not. And I think that to me is so powerful, that the fact that the more we talk about it, the more we scratch at the sort of the surface of the stigma talking about this issue, the more it allows people to come forward and talk about it and say, I want to face my own issues with this problem, but also help other people that are going through it who think they're alone. Perfect example. I don't know I know you've been traveling a bit, but even this last week, on Monday, there was a really big push and a really big story that came out with Evan Rachel Wood, who talked about how she had been in a very abusive relationship in 2010. So she started helping to trend the new hashtag I'm not okay. And she started it on Monday, and then some other friends of hers, both celebrities as well as other sort of people in that world, also started sort of sharing their stories. But because of the fact that domestic violence compared to like the Me Too movement and sexual assault, because of there's a different sort of, I think, connotation that's attached to domestic violence, where there's a lot of blaming, saying, well, if you knew this person and this person was, bad to you and hurt you, why would you go back or why would you stay? Versus with sexual assault, there's a different, I think, sort of framing about talking about sexual assault. And so I think one of the issues that has come about with domestic violence is still there's this whole idea where a lot of victim blaming still happens today. And I think that's why the issue is not talked about as openly. But at the same time, too, obviously, all the domestic violence advocates, the movement, when we heard and started seeing this trending hashtag, as well as these stories of people sharing their stories online, and a lot of us were really excited to see this finally happening, because it's been so long since really seeing a lot of sort of public sort of confirmation and talking about, what domestic violence is, who domestic violence affects, and how do we help, de-escalate domestic violence from occurring.
Right. Well, I think as someone who has been, I've been a victim of domestic violence on so many different levels. Like lived it, breathed it. It impacted me from the time I was, a small child up till even recently had some, I would call them some mind F's going on with somebody that was, I know all the signs of someone who is an abuser because I've lived through it. And I've had that initial mind control that has happened to me in all the relationships first. Like, I felt like that was the first step. It was like someone treating me very, like I'm very, very loved. And then all of a sudden things just started to be twisted and like gaslighting and all this weird behavior that was
crazy. Yeah. What the type of gaslighting today.
And then, yeah. It's like you look at for me, I'm like looking at the situation. I'm like, I'm completely sane. And I'm coming from my place of love. And then like this person saying, no, it happened this way. And I'm like, wait a minute, that can't be right. But after you are going through this for so long, you've already been locked in by love or what you think is love. And then it's all of a sudden things slowly twist. And then you're being physically abused, but you're like emotionally attached to this person. And I'm a very strong, independent, loudmouth, like shoot from the hip type of person in many moments. And it's weird for me to think back to in my life, like, oh my God, like how the hell did you become a victim? And if you became a victim, women who are not as, I don't want to say not as strong, but like not as like tough, how on earth are they ever going to get out of it? Because they're not feeling empowered, and to break that cycle and to talk about it is so important. And I'm so glad that you're doing this. So for people who are listening, can you kind of just touch on what are the signs of domestic abuse?
Sure. What you just mentioned is very common, which is I think why another reason why you talk about why you were interested in working in this issue is that some of my hardest and sort of my most, I think, when you think about situations and clients that we've helped have been most heartbreaking because they're exactly the situation that you're talking about. They are educated. They are, everything, sort of their whole journey through life and through like everything from schooling to, sort of the little check marks they've made on their checklist for their journey into adulthood. They look just like that. So I think when you get into situations where, why someone goes back or why someone stays in an abusive relationship, the hope that you can be the one that to change that person, the hope that, if I would just love this person enough and just get through this and not, I know that they came up in a broken family or they're dealing with their own addictions or their own problems. I need to be the stronger person to make sure that, they get through this. And so I think that a lot of that, again, as women, with personalities that were strong and also trying to figure out how do we do this? I don't need someone else's help. I can figure this out. And so that's often one of the biggest hurdles, I think, in someone in this situation, because they think, well, if I could just do X, Y, Z a little bit more, I know that I could help this person, change and not lose their temper. And, maybe we'll go through anger management together or, through counseling together. But obviously if that person doesn't want to change, you can't, change that person. So that's one of the things that is probably one of the most eye-opening, I think, situations people don't realize, that I think the stereotype of the person who goes through this abuse, but also the shame with that. A lot of the women who I've, worked with who had those degrees, who came from loving, everything. And they were saying, how could I have gotten to this place, and how do I get out? But then at the same time too, but I'm so embarrassed that I've gotten this far and so deep into this relationship, that I don't want to ask for anyone's help. I want to figure out how to dig out of this by myself. So obviously some of the, the easy signs that we all recognize, like stereotypically, like in the movies and, even in the definitions of the physical abuse, the black eye, the bruises, I almost, even like wearing a turtleneck when it's summertime because you're trying to, cover up marks on your neck or marks on your arms. But then there's the deeper. There's obviously the verbal, the mental, the little jabs. You're not going to wear that tonight, are you? Or, like, did you, little things that aren't direct. So then, like you mentioned, psychologically, they start adding up, and they start adding up to make you doubt yourself, make you doubt not just, physically, like your appearance or your own, like, successes, but even in decision making. Making you think like, well, maybe I shouldn't do that, or maybe he's right, or maybe she's right that, that this is something that, is not, it shouldn't be really important to me, that, and so you start doubting your own things, that your own values of what you used to believe in. You also stop sort of checking in with the people that you cared about before, and so there's a lot of that jealousy that turns over. Like, why do you have to go home for Christmas? Why don't you just stay with me? If you really love me, you would do X, Y, Z. If you really cared about me, you would do X, Y, Z. Threatening to hurt. I mean, we often hear stories. Well, he said or she said that if I leave, or if I don't come back to that person, that relationship, he's going to kill himself. He's going to hurt the pet. He's going to hurt the dog. He's going to, he threatens to do this. And so a lot of that really manipulative, and also threats to harm, threats to hurt, that then make you feel guilty that you are, making the situation worse by not staying in the relationship. But also the psychological and the with technology today, we see so much, the gaslighting that we see, as well as abuse of technology, because we're so dependent on GPS. We're so dependent on our cell phones, on our, to drive somewhere, checking in our social media. It's so easy to easily stalk somebody. And I think another thing when, relationships start out with like, well, let's be honest with each other. Let's share each other's passwords. Let's share each other's, all our accounts. I want to see what, and then the whole thing, well, if you don't share it with me, what are you hiding? That whole like reverse sex psychology. And so, a lot of that obviously has to do with control. So if you see little jabs at, that person trying to maintain control, but in different tactics, whether it's psychological, whether it's verbally, obviously physically is, the most obvious one, take a step back. I think it's really important to take a step back and to ask questions like, before I met this person, before I was in this relationship, how did I normally do things like that were in that area? How did I normally respond? How did those things normally make me feel? And I think, if you can ask those questions and feel that you're being minimized, that you're being, you're told that your opinion is not worthy, that it's not as important, that you're asked always to check in, that your opinion by itself is not enough. I think those are some of the things that you can also, question and sort of evaluate in terms of if you are in an unhealthy relationship.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I just listening to you, like, yes, I'm just like checking off all of the boxes. And I think the most important thing is like initially in the relationship, if there's like the person says something that kind of like hits you in the heart with like a bolt of lightning, but not in a positive way.
Right.
It's like, like for me, like for sure, that's this like a sign to definitely take a step back and analyze the relationship. And I
think there's another piece of it too, is that we have to remember that it's really personal. And so when I go and teach, talking about warning signs and healthy relationships to even like a high school students, we do this exercise where I have them, it's like a privilege exercise. And so I had them stand up and I read a bunch of like, it's just statements. I have a credit card that I could live in a hotel for a month. I have friends who I could call within the next 30 minutes if I was in trouble. I have, all these, I have a car. I have, I feel my mental health is at a level where I know that if someone said something mean to me, I would respond in this way, or I'd be able to reach out to someone to lean on. So another thing I think that we forget, and we also do, because it's a self-protection mechanism, I think, we're saying that if I were her, or if I were him, I would leave. So I want to make it, very clear to people understanding that every relationship is very personal that's abusive. If your abuser knows that you need your meds because you have diabetes, or that you need some medication for anxiety or for depression, or that you need to every day do something that helps you with your schedule or with your life. I think that's really important to note, that abusers are very specific in their manipulative and abusive tactics. That's really personal to you. And so I want people to understand also too that that's, I think, a sort of differentiator understanding when I think we make that sort of statement or saying that, well, if I were him, I would have, of course, left. Like, I don't know why this person went back. And so that's something that I think that it's a lot of victim blaming in understanding why somebody gets stuck in this abusive relationship, even though on the outside, everything might look, really, really rosy.
Oh, exactly. And, I think one of the most embarrassing moments of my life was in college when I was dating someone, and, we had this horrible incident being, dragged by my hair, thrown down the steps, me shoving him to get him away from me. And, he like nearly falls through a window and is broken. It cuts him, like one of the most traumatic moments in my life. And the whole time being shouted these horrible things to me that were really just diminishing my self-confidence. And like, I cannot get those voices out of my head, even now, like, oh my God, 9 years later. But after that was going back home, telling my mom everything that had happened. And my mom, who doesn't drink, like opening up a can of beer, like she was so stressed over this. And then a few months later, re-engaging in that relationship with that person, and then telling my mom and back with him, which, was horrible. But, doing the work and like stepping out of that relationship, and, now just being very conscious of who I share what with, as far as those vulnerabilities that are my insecurities that allow someone to control me.
Take advantage.
Exactly. So it's like, know yourself, know I don't want to call them weaknesses, but know your soft spots. And then if somebody's attacking them, that's a sure sign to try to cut the cord. So Becky, you're working in this space that is not, it's heavy. This is really heavy stuff. It's not light and bright. So do you have any rituals or practices that you go through daily, weekly, monthly, annually that kind of keep you in above the negativity line?
It's a great question, because I think that people who work in advocacy or work in this space, often the burnout rate's really, really high. And so even from a very early time, like when I first started working even in the court systems, one of the things that people still today always laugh, because one of my rituals is always taking a bath. So even when I was in college and, looking for a place and like with roommates, or one of the things that's sort of me time is taking a bath and just sort of decompressing and helping me like sort of de-stress, but be by myself. I think also too, one of the things that's really important to me is fitness. I think as I've gotten older, also as a woman, everyone uses fitness for different reasons, whether it's aesthetically on the outside, or, stress release, or whether it's for, health reasons. For me, it's something that's very cathartic as well. I need to work out in the morning, get it out of the way. It helps me sort of zen myself, but also too, again, sort of being by myself when I'm always like around people and talking and surrounded by like sort of like a lot of noise. Fitness has really helped me a lot. Another thing too for me is really finding quality, like, QT time with friends and family. That's really, really valuable, where you can turn off your phone and really having honest and checking in with your loved ones, and, really listening to active listening. I think one of the things that we often do when we ask, and I've seen this with friends, where I'll be like, you're asking me this, but you're going to ask the same question to 4 other people, because we're all going to talk about it. And you want to hear your answer to validate what you want to do. And, that's not fair, as well as you're wasting both of our times. And so one of the things, and I remember seeing that and hearing about that with her, and, saying that to her, and then saying, well, do I do that? Like, what is my sort of ritual with active listening, and how do I really actively listen? So that's something that I've really taken some time to do. One of the things that I wanted to share, that my sister went through the same thing too. We both, when I first started my nonprofit in 2006, and when she was, I think her first year of medical school, when she was studying and, really stressed out, both of us experienced alopecia. I had it really bad, where alopecia is sort of pattern baldness that women often will experience. And usually the biggest sort of reason for alopecia is stress. And so I literally, in 2006, I remember asking my partner at the time, and he was like, he obviously knew I was so stressed out because the doctor was like, you have to stress less about stress. You have to, don't stress about stress. Obviously it's making it worse. And I was like, can you give me a shot or like a lotion or some pills? Literally I had literally like 3-inch basically spots on my head. I 3 of them that basically it felt like a baby's butt, and there was no hair, and they're just growing bigger. But I couldn't see them because they're on my head. I had long hair at the time. And so, where as a woman, my hair was part of my identity and my like confidence. It was debilitating where you're being told like, you can't, the only thing you can do is, stress less about it. So I think that was an eye-opening experience for me to understand and realize, not having control over my body, where, you understand that you can only do so much, but if you can't even take care of your own self, how can you be good for anybody else? And so I think that was a very eye-opening, as well as kind of, like, you're human. You need to, you obviously need to take a step back and learn how to slow down. But also, like the question that you asked, you have to really find something personal that works for you to help you be able to decompress and, be able to step out of what you're doing and take a moment and, have some me time.
Beautiful. And if you were to go back to, a younger self,
sure.
And give some words of wisdom, like what age would you be and what would you say?
So what I think would be the age that I would like to go back to and be able to, talk to myself, would probably be at the age of 29. At the time, I had just come off the show, Survivor, and I was in this whole, like, I think, rush, as well as this whole idea, I need to start this nonprofit. I need to go. I need to take the success from the show and the media exposure and create this thing. And I didn't take time to really smell the roses. I didn't take time to enjoy this amazing experience, because I think that because I was quitting my job and I was starting something new that I wanted to have become successful right away, I feel that a lot of things got rushed, including relationships with friends, also with my family. And so if I could, go back to a certain age, I think that it would definitely be 29, but more so in the big picture of a big juncture in your life where you're making everything from a career change to dealing with a lot of different emotions and expectations, not just from around you, but that you're putting on yourself. And I think that, like you mentioned as well, I think because I was, just turned 29, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm about to turn 30 very soon. And what have I done with my life? What have I accomplished? So I think that definitely was a time period that I wish I could have maybe said, when you're in it, all you see is like what you have to get done. But also learning to appreciate and experience that, was a once in a lifetime experience, and also being able to really enjoy it for what it was.
Beautiful. And where you are now, like, what are you celebrating, or as I like to say, tooting your horn about?
A couple of things I am able to express being proud of right now at this sort of juncture in my life. One, a lot of nonprofits don't make it past year 10 or even make it to year 10. And to have Becky's Fund, be in our 11th year, I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of passing the bar. I'm not a very good test taker, and I have high anxiety in those situations. And so people always talk about, even, when I was younger, and talking about what's one of your biggest accomplishments, or what's your biggest accomplishment. Passing the bar was definitely up there. I also think where I am in my life, I'm very happy, overall, in terms of my health, in terms of the people that are in my life, in terms of my relationship with my parents and my sister and her, her 2 sons and her husband. I had a really big scare with my father over the last 2 years. And it put a really big, I think, sort of eye-opening sort of, thing where I realized that we're not getting younger, and the relationships that we have with the people who sort of formed who we are today, how important that is. And I think as we get older, you also realize, the things that are, it's as cheesy as it might sound, you realize the things that are really important, and to make sure to, again, tell those people how much, they mean to you, spend time with them, make time for them. One of the things that I recently have had to experience was sort of impact of, my age and what it feels like to be my age. And for a long time, I played very aggressive sports, including football. And I broke my fourth finger on my right hand a couple years back. And instead of taking care of it and going to the doctor and, getting it fixed, I just continued to play. I was playing in 4 leagues a week. So I was a little bit obsessed with football, but I also knew that with my personality and the work I was doing, it was a part of me that I used for my stress release. And then after breaking the fourth finger, I ended up breaking my third finger, and I've had, about 4 surgeries, and I'll be having my 5th surgery on both fingers in April in LA. And I think that having this whole thing about taking care of yourself so that you can do things for the future, for the long run, instead of always doing things 110% and not thinking about the consequences. I think that's something that also that I've, come to sort of have peace with. I think that I was always trying to do all these different things that where I think you don't really have a reality check or gut check, and you look in the mirror and say, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing these things? What do things that are really important and that are good for you and are healthy for you. And so, I don't know if that sort of answers your question of where you are today or what you're doing with your life today and sort of some of the reflection. But one of the main things is, doing things that you love, but also being around people and spending time with people that you love, that you care about.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, those are beautiful things to celebrate. Well, as we bring this conversation to a close,
sure.
Is there anything that you would like to add before we say bye?
I think that, like you mentioned, the whole reason, I think that this whole podcast, this project, that you've created, I think it's really, really important to initiate the conversations that we often, as women, don't have. And like you mentioned, like a lot of my experiences, positive experiences that I've had with other people, specifically with women, is being able to share. And I think that we use that tactic even with our clients, the whole mirroring thing, that if you let down your guard and show vulnerability, usually the person that you're with is more open to do it too. And I wish that as a society, we would create more spaces for women to do this, not just, in these spaces that we often have to create on our own. But I wish, like, institutionally, there was more opportunities for women to be able to have these open, very honest conversations. Recently, I went to this event, and there was a woman there that was with her friend, and she sat down next to where the space I was at, and it was reserved for my girlfriends. We were having a celebration for her birthday, but it was part of like a big fundraising event. And she was really, really like nasty to me. And, and I obviously, when you first receive this response and you're by yourself, you're like taken aback, and then I saw her the next day randomly at another event. And she called me some nasty words, and my first reaction obviously was that you want to retaliate because you're feel your pride is
Right.
But then I took a step back and I was like, her issues are not with me. Her issues are she's not happy with herself or with her situation or XYZ. But again, like, part of me was wanting really to just go out to her and be like, I'm the same as you. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know why you're upset with me, but like, the whole idea, like, women should be each other's best friends. There shouldn't be this negativity. There shouldn't be this competitiveness. I feel like, but a lot of times I think society, as well as messaging around certain things, pits us against each other and also prevents us from being able to share and learn from each other. And so that's something that I think that, if we could do more of that, such as through your podcast and sharing stories, as well as allowing women to be able to let down their guard and be transparent with each other and be honest and be vulnerable, I think that that's something that I wish and hope that more women would be able to do with each other.
That is absolutely beautiful. And I love that you said that, because for the longest time I would look at women and just think, oh God, I guess a bit of maybe envy or jealousy. And recently someone had said, you need to turn, not to me, but it was just a video I was watching about turning jealousy into admiration. And then, going
Sure.
towards those people that you want to be more like, and, getting to know them and respecting them and respecting their process. And, once you've learned to love yourself and empower yourself, everyone else around you becomes a friend and an ally versus a competitor. So that's one of my goals with Her Drive, is just to really show how similar all of us are and the struggles that we each go through, but also, what comes with supporting one another and, pushing yourself further and, taking the journey or the road less traveled and getting off the highway and saying, fuck this, I'm going to off-road through life, and it's going to be way bumpier, but it's going to be worth it in the end. It's going to lead me somewhere really beautiful. So thank you, Becky, for sharing your story. And just as we close, can you let everybody know where they can find out more about your organization?
Sure. So my organization, our website is www.beckysfund, BECKYSFUND.org. And our focus, as I mentioned before, is really to empower people to learn more about domestic violence and how to prevent it, as well as obviously directly being able to help get them out of the situation, whether it's, through support financially, through legal, mentally, and also understanding that we all have a personal responsibility to be part of the solution. I think that just the same way that when you were talking to right now about women helping other women, I think we all have a responsibility to help on each other. I think that we are all given gifts, whether it's, being able to communicate, being able to connect. I think that, we have life is so wonderful. There are so many amazing things in this world. And I think as human beings, but especially as women, we have a responsibility to help sort of lift each other up to help us reach our goals. So thank you again for this opportunity. I really had a really amazing time chatting with you and your questions. And I'm really excited for this project and being part of your project.
Oh my God. Well, thank you so much. It's such a blessing to have you. And thank you for not only inspiring me, but inspiring others and being a beacon of love and goodness and prevention for people who really need this type of support. So thanks a lot for being on Her Drive.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Her Drive with Cindy Kramblet. If you want to know more about today's guest or know a fascinating woman you'd love for me to interview, please see the show notes, visit Instagram or her-drive.com. And please, 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 if you love the show, leave a review on iTunes. Thanks for riding along and subscribe to join our next woman and her drive to success.